This Saturday, we're talking about the Anima Animus
The divine other.
because we like to talk about complicated things. And
Yes.
no, it's an incredible subject
Mhm.
because Jung really saw it as an important piece of the individuation process.
Mhm.
So we're going to talk about how does it play into intimate relationships,
Mm.
because it does play into intimate relationships. We could say it's really the organ with which we connect with each other, besides the sexual.
The organ. Well, I like calling it the divine other because it's really when we truly fall in love, we're seeing the divine in the other person, or that infatuation is we think the other person is divine, and it's a misperception, and we fall into that shiny little beautiful image of that person, and they're bright and wonderful, and then eventually they let us down. It's almost like they it was a bait and switch.
Right. Yeah, and thinking about it, we were thinking there's three things that we want to talk about. One is the anima animus as a force of the psyche and of nature. The other one is, what does falling in love mean in the context of this force that drives us and compels us to seek out strangers and become one with them in a sense. And then the other one is, what are the spiritual dimensions of this anima animus work?
And so let's start off. Those of you, I hope you participated in our 3-part series on the intro to Jungian depth coaching. And we talked about our coach training. And this is definitely something we go deeper in our coach training. So just want to put a shout out. If you're interested in going deeper, please let us know, and we'll let you know how you can go deeper with this work. But let's start off with, we talked about that the map of the soul, and we talked about that there's a persona element of our psyche, which is the mask that we wear for others. Then what we don't accept, or we don't allow accept about ourselves, or think is unacceptable traits in just being a human being in the world, we put in a shadow. And the shadow, a lot of people are familiar with Jung's work. The shadow work is about reclaiming those parts that we've divorced from ourselves, rejected, abandoned, and reclaim them and integrate them into our self so we can become more whole. But then the next level after the shadow is this wonderful energy that's inside of us called the anima or animus. And it depends on if you're male or female, what one you have. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So when we talk about the anima animus, how would you define that? Jung even had a hard time defining it because it's so we don't have anything to really kind of relate to what it is, because it's beyond our conscious awareness.
Yeah. Well, as a force, you can think of it as these universal forces that are everywhere in nature, the day and the night, the duality, if you will, of nature, the male and female, the yin and yang, and in some of the Hindu traditions, the Shakti and the Shiva, the Shakti being the female principle and Shiva being the male principle. And yoga was really the union of those two universal forces to transcend them, in essence. Our work as human beings is to transcend our biology. Right? Because if we only live it by the biology, then it's like a friend of mine used to get depressed when we were learning about DNA and the genes and how they propel us to reproduce. Right? It's like a biological imperative. Every living thing wants to reproduce and leave its DNA. So if you only think of that as, well, that must be the sole purpose of love and relationships, then you're reducing it down to
well, that's why people that talk about hormones and biology of love, and that's sort of taking the magic and the spiritual mystical aspects of romantic love.
Right. So for us, psychologically, we're psychological beings, we're spiritual beings. And so it has to mean something, or we have to come to terms with it at that level too, at those levels, at the psychological, emotional level, and then at the spiritual level. So this force obviously plays out in our life in an incredible way.
So it's like ourselves, our superficial selves, is sitting on this amazing energy, and we don't realize it. And then we end up falling for someone, and they have the amazing energy, and we want to get it through the other person.
Yeah. It's always good to consult the Greeks. They were so good at looking at these things philosophically. So they had a couple of things as far as attraction, which is really where the story begins of love. They said there's a couple of elements of love that they called Ludus and Arrows. So Ludus is that playful flirtiness, right? That kind of playing around at falling in love. But we don't want to get stuck there, because then we always see those people, right, that
they lost that spark, right?
Well, they think that that is the totality of love.
Yeah, as
That
long as
they
you're
have to keep
flirting.
that flirty feeling always going, or else that it's not love. But it's really just the starting point. Eros is more about the sexual attraction and the kind of developing that flirtiness into real passion. And that real passion, of course, leads to bigger things like marriage or coupling and attachment and bonding.
So we were talking about, what is the anima animus?
So, well, we're talking in the context of that force. So that force propels us through these psychological mechanisms of flirtiness and attraction to experience something deeper.
Yes.
Right.
I do want to step back, though, and just define anima animus so people can have that framework. So in Jung psychology, if you're a female on a conscious level, your opposite would be the animus. And for men, they have the anima. And if you're not sure, or you're non-binary and all those, you have to discover what you have in your unconscious, which side it would be. But right now, let's just keep it simple, and then we can go into more complicated ideas. But so a woman has an image of a man called the animus, a masculine image in her psyche. It's like a masculine force that she represses. And then a man has the feminine force that he represses. And if you think about it socially, that's what we do. We're a woman. We grow up. We don't want to be like boys. We're proper. Girls are, don't get dirty and all those things, like be sweet and nice and kind. And boys are, don't cry, don't do this. So a lot of our emotional of men, a lot of their emotional tendencies get pushed in their shadow, but also it's that denying that feminine. So we have this kind of opposite, and then the force was born with us as we were. This isn't something that was formed as we grow up. It's always there, and it's kind of a force that we tap into when we fall in love.
Yeah, so that duality, let's say Jung, the way he saw it was that duality of day and night, light and shadow, is built into our individual psyche. And it takes the form of whatever we're expressing in our conscious life as male or female. The unconscious then is going to take the opposite role. It's complementary role because it works like a battery.
We're both feminine and masculine, and even a lot of women, especially, they were all female until their cell turned to female. They were all female until the DNA switched to male, and so they have an extra skip in there when they're born too. So they're all female initially at
biological
level.
Yeah, but here we're talking about more the psychological level, like what do we express in our conscious living life, in our social life, in our being. So often a man will express the masculine qualities of directness, of logic, of reason,
of action.
Taking action, taking the leadership role. And the women, or a woman might express the yielding force, the
Receptive.
community, the building of community, the nurturing
Mhm.
element. Now, these are not strict, obviously. We
Mhm.
see that, like you say, they're in both of us, both male and female, but one predominates.
Mhm.
So we can say that that's the conscious element.
Mm.
Then the unconscious takes the opposite role.
Mhm.
The things, it's not really it's not really repression. It's more like we ignore it,
Mhm.
right? We're not focused on it, and so
Mhm.
it fades into the background, into the unconscious.
And so when we just to be clear, this is not about your personal history. This is not about this animus is something you're born with. It's part of your psyche that
Yeah,
you have
absolutely.
already.
They're universal,
Yeah.
and you can see it reflected in all of nature.
Mhm.
All animals work on the same
Mm.
principle.
So, one of the things Jung talked about was that it's a force that's autonomous, which means that it has kind of a life of its own. It has kind of a will of its own in a way.
Mm.
And so we're born with this force. We have this. We think we're in control of our lives. We can make choices like, I want a man who's blah blah blah, and he has a good job, and he's wonderful. And a man wants a woman who's sexy and obedient to him or whatever they want, or smart and all those things, and not, a lot of drama. And so we have this force and this desire, but but unconsciously that animus, depending on your male or female, forces you, to first of all connect with the opposite sex, because really, truly, if we didn't have that force, we kind of want to be around our own kind. So you're socially conditioned to be like a woman. You kind of are more like, a lot of women say, I wish I was a lesbian because I think I get along better with women than men. But we have this desire for love that we can't control. It's like and so this is what we're talking about with the animus. It's this force that's trying to connect us, but it's trying to connect with ourselves, but through the force is also to find ourselves through another.
Yeah. So you mentioned the personal history, and that's an important piece,
Yes.
because it does play into the way we choose our mates.
Yes,
Obviously,
absolutely.
we see it over and over that people replay the family patterns, intergenerational family patterns. Often there's a theme of betrayal, or there might be a theme of divorce, or there might be a theme of uh, uh, infidelity,
or a woman being the submissive one.
Yes, all those things. So we want to be aware of those things, because that becomes essentially part of our shadow.
Mhm.
Now, those are the things we repress often, because we don't want to look at them, or we think, I don't want any part of that, right?
Yeah.
We're going
And we're going to
off.
reject it.
Yeah, we reject it, but in rejecting it, it doesn't go anywhere. It simply goes into our personal unconscious. Then it's projected onto the other person, right? When we fall in love, when we project that animus force onto the beloved person, it's mixed up with a shadow, because if you
It's
haven't
this
done
beautiful force that wants you to find that, to have that divine expression of masculine, feminine connection, but it gets distorted. It's kind of like this beautiful force of light, and then there's this filter of this shadow that kind of makes you fall in love with the people that match your pattern versus who you consciously really want. And so you're split amongst yourself. And so just to reiterate, it's kind of like, again, that there's these layers of us. We think we're so one side, so simple, but we're very complicated, complex creatures. It's not about just thinking positive and putting a vision board up and hoping love comes. We have this conscious mind. We have the unconscious patterns for the emotional template that we've been given through our life. And then underneath that is this spiritual force of the anima or animus that is driving us to connect. So this is why, I want to talk about one of the things that we see a lot is that we either see people really truly like want love. I got to find it. I got to find it. It's like an obsession. And then we see the polar opposite where people are saying, I don't want a
I don't need
relationship.
it.
I don't need it. I'm working on my business right now. I'm working on my career, or I've been divorced 3 times. I'm focusing on my kids. And there's either an extreme, like one level of, oh my God, I have to have it or I'm going to like die tomorrow, or I don't need it at all. And so, but we want to say that both of those forces, it's almost as if we still aren't we aren't connected to our anima animus, that deeper level. We haven't understood what's really going, what that force is. And for some women, it's riding that force, but keep repeating the same pattern. And the other woman who's rejecting it is sitting on that force, but she feels the pressure. But she has to put up the persona of, oh, I don't need a relationship right now. I have everything. Men suck or women suck and they're terrible. And it's weakness to want a relationship, and we're like kind of pushing away that desire. But eventually we know although we don't think anyone knows, but we know inside if we're suppressing it and denying that desire.
Yeah.
So what really the anima animus is that desire to connect. It's like part of our journey in life. We talked about this on our last podcast about the spiritual journey in love. It's part of our journey is to work with relationships. So what does falling in love mean in the anima animus?
In
What
the
does it
context,
mean?
in the context of this incredible universal force that's compelling us to move towards another, that divine other. So when we fall in love, right, the one walks into the room and our heart
Hair flows.
and our heart really kind of breaks in a sense, because we see that there's something beyond me, right? There's something beyond my little cocoon, and I want some of that.
It connects you to that something inside of you that's so deep. It's like you could feel it, touch it, because it's like I think of it as an awakening. It's like awakening the anima animus when we fall in love. It's like, what is that? What is this feeling? And we first feel it when we have our first crush.
Yeah, Jung called it the soul image. So when the soul image arises in us, of course we're transformed. It's like nothing is the same after that. We're completely transported back to the Garden of Eden.
And that's why our first love is so precious. It's almost like a lot of people say they can never forget their first love.
That's right.
Because it's the innocence with that feeling. It's our first taste of it.
Yes. Unfortunately, like we were saying,
the bad news,
when we haven't done our shadow work, what happens is that the unconscious projection includes a lot of the fear about intimacy, or the things that we pushed away about our family systems, that we didn't want to experience those things, so we pushed them away. But now, because the unconscious is open, they come up. And guess who's going to be the receiver of all that shadow projection?
The one you love.
That's right. That's why we end up hurting each other so badly. And we see all of us have seen that couples that were so in love then end up hating each other and becoming enemies because of that unprocessed shadow. Basically, they haven't done their shadow work.
They haven't done their shadow work, and they feel like the other person is having all those issues, and they haven't realized that it's just a projection of this unresolved ideas in themselves. And this isn't like thinking about something's broken in you and that we're all broken. And I heard someone say we match by the wounds in ourselves, and it really is more of it's that when we pull together, we're actually there to, in a way, rescue each other. Like we're here to awaken each other and realize what we perceive that person doesn't accept in us is really what we don't accept in us. If they're putting us down, or they're, running away because they don't think we're attractive, or ghosting us, we have to come to terms with, how have we abandoned ourselves? Where do we don't love ourselves deeply? Versus, I think, we make the other person, they use that term container. We make the other person the container for all our, salvation. And that is such a huge burden to put on someone else, to say, you are in charge of making me feel okay about myself. And when we don't like it, when it's put on us, but that's the
Hmm.
power of the animus. It's like drives us to have this resolution of these parts that are unresolved. But then if you're not aware of what's happening, you end up blaming the other person, or saying that that person is the one who's causing all my problems, or being too needy, or putting too many demands on me. When I was my whole thing, just to kind of give a story, is my mother. I love her, she's wonderful. But when I was younger, I had this teacher in 6th grade, Mrs. Tabarosi, and she would always talk about feminism. And I would come home and I'd be like, yeah, feminism. And my father was like, oh no. He was like Archie Bunker. And my mother was like, the typical stay-at-home mom. And I used to think, well, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be trapped and not have, be independent. And I just was kind of this spry young woman. And so when I grew up, if a man tried to control me, I said, no, 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 no. I ran away. And then I still wanted love, but I was afraid of being trapped. And
Hmm.
so that's what I kept creating. So any man that loved me and adored me, I was like, red flag, I got to go. You're going to tell me what to do. I'm going to end up being a housewife that has no power. And it was all this power game, and it was all based on that template. And actually, as I grew up, I realized my mother had so much power, but my perception of that template is what's important. So we think that our mothers are being submissive, but when actuality, they held all the power, but we didn't realize it, because as kids, we see one perspective. So it's really important to understand that your past experience isn't what actually happened. And we talk about that a lot, is that the shadow side is really what we perceived that family dynamic to be, rather than what it actually was.
Yeah, and it's like you say, it's not about fixing or healing. It's simply that if we are not aware of it, if we have it in the unconscious mind, then it's projected outward,
Mhm.
because that's the tendency of our mind. Is we see that we see the world through that emotional template that
Mhm.
is built up in our family life, and that's how we see the whole world, through that emotional template, especially relationships.
And that animus force, as I'm thinking about this, like the animus force in me was just as passionate of pulling me away
Mhm.
from guys that were really nice. It's like this force was like the shadow was saying, no, no, no. But I
Mm.
felt like it was the same force of me wanting to go toward the men that are unavailable. And it was, I called it the flirfiness.
The that
That
ludus,
Ludus.
yeah.
And I just kind of was always, I would say, my friends would be like, "Oh, did you have a date last night?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And they, "So did you feel flirty, Deb?" And I'm like, "No, no flirty. I didn't feel flirty."
Mm.
Or I lost the flirtiness, and I would lose that passion with people that were a threat to that freedom. So it's almost like the
Mm.
force was always there, but the target was off.
The
And
force is with
the
you.
force was always with me, but the ego is always just kind of, we create these conditions to it when we were younger, to protect ourselves, or to think, in a way, like we strategize these survival mechanisms in our toolkit to keep us, from being trapped, or from, had a good intention. But if we don't realize that that's not real, and all those assumptions aren't looked at, we end up making those decisions unconsciously. And then we feel like this force makes us fall in love with the people that are wrong for us in a way, but they're actually right for us because they're reflecting our patterns. So
Yeah.
whenever we feel a strong attraction to someone, even if they're wrong, it's what we call the trigger. It's exactly where we need to not go toward the person, but go inside ourselves and say, wow, this person is kicking up a lot of energy in me. And how do there's something here for me, especially if on a conscious level, yeah, they're kind of not, not the right, but I feel this like urge to be with them. That's where you
Yeah.
say, okay, there's something here. and let me work with this feeling. And a lot of times we don't see it with people that we're not attracted to. We only see it when we're really attracted to and heartbroken. And the best times for us to really work on ourselves and become who we really are is after a divorce or a breakup.
Yeah, because it kind of brings a lot of stuff up, right?
Yeah.
When we go through divorce or breakup, we go through it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, we go through that dark night of the soul,
Mm-hmm.
where we're forced to look at our emotions and
Mm.
what is in the unconscious, what's coming up for us, and it's a great process. So, from that point of view, Jung would say that it's that the animus is really prompting us
Mm.
towards individuation.
Mm-hmm.
The anima animus is prompting us towards becoming our true self, our complete self. And really, if you see great relationships, that's what they do for people. They allow the individual to flourish as an
Mm-hmm.
individual, to
Mm-hmm.
find their profession, to
Mm.
express their work, to really be comfortable in their own skin and express, their motherness, their fatherness, all that good stuff that's in us. A good relationship that's what it's meant to do, is
Mm.
allow us to express the fullness of our being. And so it has a spiritual component. Even
Mm.
the heartbreaks, they're
Mm.
meant to teach us. They're meant to guide us inward into that deeper realm of the unconscious mind.
And there are some feminine aspects and archetypes in the unconscious, not just the animus, but the animus for a woman is a primary one
Yeah.
that basically is really the doorway to all the others. And we want to look at it not in a masculine, like male characteristic, but more of an energy
Yeah.
than and this force in us, if we don't do our shadow work, what will happen is this force needs to express itself. And so for a woman, the animus, if they call it a possession, it kind of takes over the ego. And at times, all this energy starts to possess the ego, which the ego is already negative. We get into, for women, get into the hyper negative judging. It's almost like the nagging woman, or the kind of crank, we call it the cranky old man, nothing's ever good. And we've all had those moments. It's like a state where this force actually takes over. We've all had those moments. And some weekends we're just like beating ourselves up, and it's an animus possession. It's just like this force is going, I have nowhere to go, so I'm just going to magnify everything in your ego. And so the best thing to do for a woman is to find a way to ground herself and connect, and not, kind of find a way to work with this force. For a man, the opposite happens. Since the man his opposite is the feminine principle, that's more emotional. So men actually become the 9-year-old mean girl, and kind of a bratty, they kind of become, their emotions start taking over their psyche. So that's where that's why I think a lot of men do more crimes, because they're passionate and angry, and they use the force in an emotional way. They kind of they can actually lose it. So if you've ever been in a fight with a man, and a woman's trying to talk it out, because women, animus is the logic, so it wants to talk it out, and we talk about it with our friends, and we're like, oh, and Jimmy, you know what he did, and we're rationalizing, and your friends are all going, yeah, that's it. And we analyze. And a man, he doesn't put it into words. He moves through emotion when he's possessed. And so he'll go for a run, he'll slam the door, he'll leave, he'll use whatever force he needs. He might want to do some sports, to move that energy. And women, we like to sit around and we like to analyze. So it's so funny, because we think we're feminine and we're women, but the animus is that part of our mind that takes over, and that rationalization and justification. And we like to use words, where men use the feeling and emotion that
Yeah.
and their
Or
passion.
drinking. I mean, I
Yeah.
come from a drinking culture.
Well, it's to
That
suppress
was
that
the
emotion, right?
go-to. Yeah, it was. Well, not really. I mean, initially you might think, yeah, it's kind of a
Oh, it's a
self-medication.
release of emotion, because the ego doesn't inhibit the emotion, and so they can be passionate and let it go.
Right, but what would come out was this little girl, like you say.
Yeah.
The people would become very kind of sentimental, over
Oh, yeah,
sentimental.
they talk with their buddies and they're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, Jimmy, that was a great time." And they start crying. And then they're like, "We can't talk about this tomorrow."
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an immaturity, like you
Yeah.
say. It's a 9-year-old, right?
Yeah,
That's very,
little
very
mean girl.
immature. That kind of
Get into
that kind
bar
of image.
fights.
But remember, these are, let's say, extreme examples
Yeah,
of
yeah.
people that are unconscious.
Yeah.
And we've all been there as young people, that we didn't know what to do with the emotions and the attraction that we felt for other people. And that plays out. But as you go through this individuation process, essentially what you're learning, all the range of emotions in the psyche
Mm.
and how to play them like an instrument.
Yes. It's like
And
an orchestra.
very much so that it becomes your best friend. The
Mm.
emotions become your best friend, and they complete you. They
Mm.
give you a way to experience life in a much more conscious way, in a much more uh, let's say mature way.
Mhm.
And and so when you do your shadow work, you're not pushing away your past history, but you're understanding how it contributed to who you are,
Mm.
what gifts it gave you. And it becomes then a vehicle for this next stage, the animas,
Mhm.
where instead of looking at life from your particular point of view, because love gives you the opportunity to transcend yourself, to transcend the
The
dualities.
ego's terrified of real love because you lose yourself with someone else.
That's
So
it.
there's a battle inside saying, "Hold back, don't
You're
give up too much."
right,
Yeah.
because
Go for
if
the wrong person because there's no chance for them to threaten you. They're not
yes,
going to be a threat if they're always running away.
right, but if you want to experience love, you have to surrender your ego.
Yeah.
There's no other way.
Mhm.
If you hold on to your ego, you're holding on to your defenses
Yes.
that you built up from your past experiences, and therefore, no matter how perfect the relationship may appear from the outside, it will not have that deep connection because
Mhm.
you're still shut down, you're
Mhm.
still defending. And so the surrender of the ego is where a lot of people get caught up, right? It's very difficult. It does require kind of some kind of training, or at least some kind of structure that
Mm.
Joseph Campbell said that was the function of mythology and ritual, was to give us the opportunity to do that difficult work of
Mm.
letting go of ourselves as ego. The
Mhm.
old persona has to die, and this new being has to come into life
Mm.
through the relationship.
Mm. Yeah, a lot of, I've heard so many stories of men who have said, I really, the woman scared him
Mm.
because he really had that strong feeling for her. So a lot of times when we get rejected in relationships, it's not that you were so terrible, but maybe you were so good. They were like, ah. And so a person can only accept someone else in their life as much as they accept their self. So the work isn't about going out there and finding your animus. It's going inside, working with the parts of yourself that you haven't accepted. So when that force, it will connect you to someone who accepts all of you if you accept all of you. So it's the external conflict is always reflecting the internal conflict. And you know, I remember when I was single, I used to always go for the guy that I couldn't have, and I realized how it was like I had this moment of clarity of my pattern. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm chasing all these men that don't want a commitment.
It's a good
I'm the
defense
one,
mechanism.
yeah, I'm the one who doesn't want a commitment. Oh my
Yeah,
God, I was so afraid of letting anyone get close to me.
yeah.
And then when I realized that, I was like, "Oh, so it's not out of my hands. So was always in my control." And it was like I saw like my whole life flash before me, and I thought of all those wasted years of my life that I didn't do the shadow work to say, I pushed so many great guys away because I was so scared of my own inner self. And it's that full self-acceptance. And it's not that, oh, I'm a great person and I love myself and people like me kind of affirmation. It's this deep reverence for who you are, like this soul of who you are, and that it's okay for you to make mistakes. It's okay for you to be, stupid sometimes or clumsy. Robbie accepts my clumsiness. And that we it's like that self-acceptance on a deep level, not the persona acceptance, but that self-acceptance that puts an opening for that other person to come in. Almost all relationships, a lot of women don't realize, or men don't realize, is that they're pushing themselves away when they get rejected. It's a part of themselves that they've been pushing away, not that other person. So when someone leaves, they're rejecting something in themselves. When you leave, you're rejecting something in yourself. And Jung is all about acceptance. And there's one element too that I want to say is that the ego that we have is just one part of our psyche. Its function is to keep us alive and safe. It has a specific function. We don't want to get rid of it. And it's kind of caught up in patterns of thinking and negativity. And it's always like trying to warn us of the past. And
not my ego.
But we can exist transcending the ego. And so I think a lot of people think transformation means, let me fix this little voice in my head, and then that'll have a transformation. But I want to tell you, the voice never goes away. Even if you transcend and you're more self-aware, that little voice is always going to be there. So I think a lot of people get stuck is trying to fix their ego when there's this whole vast, like we talk about, of our psyche and other parts of ourselves that are so much bigger than the ego that we could use. And we're focused on this little tiny little voice and trying to get it to behave when it's never going to behave. You can't transform the ego. It's going to be there, but we can transcend it. So there's a difference between transforming the ego and transcending the ego.
Well, I'll ask you this one.
Ask me a question. I'm ready.
What about people that decide they want to be alone? That marriage, partnership is not for them.
I would ask them to say, are they making that decision based on fear? And initially they'll say no, but I would love for them to sit with that. If love was a choice, if you had a choice, if you could wave a magic wand and there'd be a wonderful, loving, ideal person, would you say no to that? I think a lot of people say, I want to be alone because they don't feel like they have the power to be with someone, that they've kind of given up in a way that it's all about the choice, and choice gives you power. So if you could choose, I'll be alone, that somehow feeds the ego's power. Like, I've chosen this versus I want, like, looking weak, like I want love, but no one wants me. And so it's about really being honest with yourself and sitting with, is this really my choice? And you might have to sit with it for a while and go into your heart and ask, is this really my choice?
Yeah. Subtle
like
difference.
If a guy, I always say to my clients, I say, oh, I'm not ready. I said, so if the ideal guy knocked on the door, you wouldn't have to do anything, no personal development, nothing.
No
you just open the door and he's there and he loves you and he's perfect.
Guaranteed.
And he looks like Brad Pitt or, someone younger. What's the new one that everyone likes? The guy from Thor, Hemsworth, and he's gorgeous and he's, rich and loving and kind and everything you've ever wanted, and or whatever, maybe not good looking isn't important to you. And would you push it away if you knew that you wouldn't get heartbroken? And I guarantee you, most people would say, yeah, I think I would like that. I mean, if they're really being honest with themselves, is to have that experience. Someone saying yes, transcending that, trying to just be alone and having that divine relationship and actually expanding your consciousness with someone else and having more of life with someone else versus just, having that personal experience. You're having a joint experience.
And what would happen to let's say the person that is alone, would there be a way to work with their animus? Or a woman that's alone, would there be a way to work with her animus?
Well, she would have to work with her shadow first. She would have to do her shadow work and then understand her patterns and not just understand, oh, I know what happened to me, more like what is the defenses that I built up around love, that because of the story that I told myself when I was younger, is the emotional template. And that emotional template are all those emotional defenses from letting someone in. And so once you're aware of that, then you connect with the inner Adam, what we call the inner Adam or the Animus, in dreams. He'll show up in people, other people. You'll see a reflection of that. When we fall in love and we have that flirty feeling with someone, we're seeing an aspect of that Animus, but it's covered up with our shadow. And so the first step, if all of you, is just look at your life. Look at the last person you fell in love with. There's a divine element where you feel that really beautiful feeling. And then the heartbreak and all that other stuff covered over it, that you're seeing your Animus and your shadow right there. It's all there. It's right there for you. It's not hidden. But if you're projecting and saying, oh, that person was wronged me and maybe I'm not good enough and he rejected me, then you're kind of missing the whole gift of that situation that's showing you and reflecting what's inside.
Yeah,
that's what we teach our coaches. This is what we train in a coaching program, is how to help people see that reflection like an X-ray machine and say, oh, I see this clearly now. What I'm perceiving is showing me something about my mind, and it's right there. And a coach who knows depth coaching can really help a client, instead of like, oh yeah, he's a jerk, keep your boundaries, shut off your phone, go out and date again and find someone else. That coach can say, well, let's look at this relationship right now. Let's look at your heartache. Let's look, and not from a fixing place, but a self-awareness, and help the person see, like kind of lift the veil of misperception and see what's really there. And then, like I said, I saw this whole pattern, and it was like instantly turned something in me, because then I realized I was the one creating it. And until you take responsibility for your love life, it's not going to change. You have to take 100% responsibility that this is coming from my mind. And that's really where the change happens. Until then, you're just projecting. You're saying, but no, Debbie, you don't understand. My ex-boyfriend was a narcissist, or my ex-husband, cheated. And, this guy, didn't have any money, or this guy was too needy. Great. Let's see, what is that reflecting about your mind? What are you pushing away? What is this showing you? Because nothing is independent of your mind. If these opportunities show up, the people that you're passionately drawn to are probably the most powerful way for you to transcend your ego and actually have that self-realization that we all want, that enlightenment that we all want, is actually in the seed of heartache. Can really show us that.
Well said.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go to questions. We got some wonderful questions here. Let's see.
We got some authors.
Someone was asking about this recording. Yes, well, if you're coming in late and you're going, oh, I missed the beginning, it'll be posted here in the group so you can watch it. In our units section, you'll see it. And then also this is going to be on our podcast as well. So you can check out our podcast, Creative Mind Living, and we'll be simulcasting it there. Okay. Do those animus shadow projections map in the ego level of anxious, avoidant attachment styles? And for avoidant or ambivalent females, does that mean over-reliance on masculine force, even if your natural state is feminine? Well, our natural state is both feminine and masculine. But yes, when we talk about attachment styles, that's the shadow. That's the shadow work. It's what are we pushing away in the shadow? The attachment styles are the expression of the shadow of our ego. And then the shadow is what are we afraid of that we created that? Those attachment styles are like a defense. Yeah. Right. Defending the ego. So yeah, I don't know if it's feminine, masculine, that type of thing, but it's really what we decided about who we are for a woman around that idea.
Well, if we drop the masculine, feminine, all we're doing is relating to the other.
Yes.
Right. There's an other person in our consciousness, in our awareness now. And how we relate to that other person, that's what the Animus is talking about.
Great question. Yeah, we have another way to look at the attachment styles. It's the two questions: is how worthy of you do you feel of love, and then how well do you trust others? And we teach that in one of our other programs. But yeah, we kind of, you decide which one you are, and there's 4 quadrants, and they're based on the Bowlby's attachment styles. How do we incorporate spirituality in surrendering the ego? It's like approaching finding love from non-attachment perspective. Well, here's the thing. It's this idea of finding love needs to be um, kind of framed in your mind, because love is really already here. Like the animus, that soul level love is already inside. That's why we feel it when we see people. We're just projecting it out there. So understanding that it's already here, and we always hear, oh, the love is already inside of you, but you have to have a direct experience. And so it's, I guess it's like surrendering the ego, but it's understanding the ego. It's not pushing it away, but understanding that the ego is going to still play its game. It still has a job to do to protect you, and it only sees you as this little human being, and it's being able to see yourself beyond the ego. And that's really it. Non-attachment is the key, because you're really, when you're attached, you're actually in fear that you can't have what you want. And so the other layer is, well, if it's inside of me, I already have it. So
Well, I don't need anybody.
Well, it's not that I don't need anyone, but now I want to find someone on a conscious level that I choose to connect with this with. And you're not coming from a deficit where I lack something and I want to come into.
It's more of a choice.
It's a choice, and that's really a more power. And then that leads to non-attachment. Great question. I'm noticing kind of duality in myself. On one side, I have the same fear of relationship that Deborah described, that I'll be trapped and die. I could never decide that the would be the right moment for fully committed relationship. Did not want to be like my mom. On the other side, I have a feeling that some previous life, I know this has not happened in this life, I had love of a soul level, which I lost, something like a death of a beloved one. And I've never been able to find anyone like this. I feel like I have a hole in my heart that never heals, and searching for it, but lost forever. Very hard. Is there any way how to find out what happened? Well, what happened was that it's the animus that you think is experienced in another life is actually, it's already here. It's right here. That's the animus. It's always with you. It's pre-born with you. That's really what that soul level love is. And so, like, I don't know, past lives and all those things. It's just, those are basically just different egos that you've related to. The soul level love is something that you've had for eternity. So it's already here. So it's not like I got to find out what happened. We know what happened. You have a soul level passion and love inside of you that you carry always, and it's about finding it inside yourself, not in another lifetime or through another person. Does that make sense? Do you have
kind of?
Well,
yeah. I mean, it's a difficult question
because it's like
it can't be answered logically.
Yeah.
But it is a calling. That longing that you have, that feeling of there's something missing. It's a calling, right? Life, or let's say the individuation process, which wells up from within, is always prompting us to do the work. It's always telling us, do this, find love, create love, experience love, because that is our true nature. That's what we're designed for. Like a bird is designed for flight, we are designed for this expression of the divine through our temporary life, right?
And it's interesting, if there is past lives, and we believe in past lives, that love is what we carry through the lives, and it's not in that other person that we're experiencing, but it's this animus, this energy that we carry. So it's not that it can be found 3 lifetimes ago I had that experience. it's in us already. We carry it throughout our existence. So it's transpersonal, basically.
Yeah. The only reality is actually the now.
Yeah.
Because if you think, well, I'm thinking about the past, but you're thinking about the past right now. When you think about the future, you're thinking about the future right now, in this moment. And so all that exists is always this now, this eternal now that's always here. This is where we do our work. Not in the future, not in the past. It's right here in this moment.
And when you have that soul level love, it feels as though you've known each other forever. It feels as though you've had many, many lifetimes together because you're really connecting to the eternal part of yourself that's beyond the persona, ego, personal history, shadow. It's this deeper self. And that's really, I mean, imagine that's what we really want is we want to transcend ourselves and become immortal. And we want to have that experience in our life, our own immortality. That's what this really true deep love can give us, is that taste of that, then drinking from the nectar of immortality, as they say. So yeah, beautiful. But you use that kind of beloved feeling that to compel you to transcend the fear of being trapped in a relationship or being trapped in the wrong one, because every relationship is the right relationship. It's always there for you to, it's,
Yeah.
you're looking, your animus comes with you, and it's just showing you what's in the way of you seeing the divine in yourself.
Yeah, it's funny, right, that love should be associated with death or the feeling of the dread of death. But if you think about it, it makes sense because it's the death of the ego.
Yes.
It's the death of the old self, the letting go of all that childhood attachment that we had.
Someone with PTSD has fallen in love with me. Does that mean I need to do more shadow work? Well, it really is what your response to that is. What is your response? It's not the PSD in him, but what is your response to that? What are you making that mean about you? Does it cause fear? What is specifically the pattern? And a lot of times the shadow is not a direct, like I have PTSD in my shadow, but there's something similar, like a fear
Or the opposite.
or
It might be a need for nurturing or taking care of people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So someone, yeah, that's true. The mother type would want to take care of someone who's injured. So it could be a tendency of the persona. So yeah, definitely look at what is there. And there's always shadow work to do. So to need to do more shadow work, welcome to the world. We're always creating shadow. And when we realize that, then we're not thinking it's hard work. We're just seeing it's part of having our psyche is alive. It's not what they told you that it's this kind of a program. If you rewire the program, then all of a sudden you're this perfect human being. It's such a lie. Our psyche's alive. It's constantly creating. And the only thing that's true and lasting is the awareness that we're alive. So that awareness that you're aware right now, that's the only true reality. The other stuff is in constant flux all the time. And so as we're riding this wave of life, it's the shadow work is part of us remembering who we really are. So don't think of it as, I think personal development has had a bad rap. It's like this hard work. I got to work on myself, but it's really, it should be an adventure that we're doing. We're discovering, new lands, new treasures in our psyche. We're getting to know each other and ourselves in all ways. It's a beautiful process. So yes, send him my way. Okay. The guy at the door. Here's one for you, Rob. Does animus play out in the child tension with a parent, not just the romantic partner?
Right, because let's say the anima, they're templates. We're born with them already. And so the opposite sex parent gives us a lot of information, and we associate let's say for a woman, the father becomes like their first experience of the animus.
Or the brothers, right?
Yeah. And so the way you relate to that experience, the relationship with your father becomes imprinted and becomes a symbol of the animus in part, because it's a universal, meaning it's already got its agenda, but the way it plays out is often associated with the father, the relationship with the father.
So the things about your father that you rejected go into your shadow, and they're played out in your animus attraction.
Yes.
or accepted, and you look for a man who's like, if you adored your father, you may look for a man just like him, but then the things of the opposite you may end up seeing in them too,
Yeah.
because no person has all perfect qualities and traits. We all have a mixture of light and dark qualities, and it's how accepting we are of that is and it's hard to accept. Our parents don't accept us. They want us to be good, and they want us to follow rules, and so we
Hmm.
have all that judgment in us, right?
Yeah. And so the only problem is that if you don't do shadow work, you end up playing out those patterns. Now, you may say, "Well, I had a great relationship with the father." Well, that's great, but it's still unconscious now.
Mm-hmm.
You're simply playing out a pattern. And what you want to do is you want to have a choice
Mm.
in what kind of love experience you create for yourself. And the only way to do that is to do your shadow work before you get into a relationship.
Mm.
Like Jung said, the best time to do relationship work is before you are in
Mm.
one.
So, for a daughter, would that also play out in the mother wound of the ego?
Yes, we see that with the daughter has a relationship with the mother, a very powerful one, and
Mm-hmm.
it has to do with what do you identify with in your mother, and what do you reject about her. And we see, I mean, this is a simple example, but we see that often the stay-at-home mother, uh, the daughter may reject that because she wants to be an independent woman and
Mm.
go and have a career. So she rejects the stay-at-home mother
Mm-hmm.
and all that it entails. And so often she's throwing out that relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the stay-at-home mom is the
Mm-hmm.
one that it's waiting for the father,
Yeah.
and to
And submissive to the
yeah,
man, and or even just open to letting the man be in her life.
that's right. And so you have to look at those things,
Mm.
not in the sense of judging or good and bad. It's simply, what did you experience as a kid, because
Mm.
that's going to play big time into the way you do relationships as an adult.
Okay, we got a couple more questions. I heard that the third love in our life is a slow warming. The first love is love at first sight. The second is about being difficult.
That's good.
What can you give insight on that? Well, I think that you're describing basically the ego working its way
Mm.
through love, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I mean, the first love is the ego's caught off guard. It's like never had that experience before, so we fall really hard the first time. And then the difficult one, I would say, is the shadow. You're really working with the shadow. And then if you individuate, then you can have that great love. Maybe that's your third love, but it depends on each person. Like we hate to put people in categories of like, you're going to go through a process like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, when she came up with the stages of grieving, she regretted it in the end because it was in the wrong order. So we never want to kind of put an expectation that if you've only had two loves, or the second love is going to be hard. It doesn't necessarily have to be.
No, that's true.
The earlier you start individuation process, like in younger than when when you're 60 you started, it kind of, maybe it'll play out that way. But if you're starting at 20, 30 years old, you start to individuate, your love life will play out differently. So it just depends on you and where you're at. For a daughter, if we had an absent father, how does that impact the animus?
Good question. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, remember, it's instilled in you already,
Mm.
so it doesn't mean you don't have an animus.
Mm.
What happens is then your ego, your mind, essentially will find father figures
Mm.
to identify with,
Mhm.
and
But
use.
also maybe not trust them.
There
Yeah.
might be that.
Mm.
It depends on how it plays out, right? What the mother says about the
Mm.
absence of the father, right? If
Yeah.
she's always kind of giving the child a bad impression that he was no good
Mhm.
because of this and that, then the child might, like I said, grow up with, like you said, that distrust
Mhm.
of men, or abandonment, or the feeling of
Well, I see a
abandonment.
lot of women with the
Yeah.
absent father, they date older men. They'll date a lot
Mm.
older men, 20 years older. They'd be like, I always date men that are, 20
Right,
years
because
older than me.
yeah, they're looking
They're
for that.
looking for that father figure.
Yeah, that's a good example right there. That if you're not conscious of things and
It'll play
they
out.
happen in your past, yeah, you'll end up playing them out unconsciously,
Mm.
and you'll find good reasons of why you're doing it.
Hmm.
So that's the tricky part. That on the surface they make sense because you
Mm.
rationalize them and you come up with this little narrative as to why you're choosing those things, but they're really coming from deeper in the unconscious mind.
How do you connect to the animus?
So if you can imagine the shadow work being like the entry point into your deeper unconscious mind,
Hmm.
right? It opens up the door into that deeper process that we
Hmm.
call our psyche. As you do your shadow work and you integrate the shadow, meaning you accept a lot of the things that you pushed away and that you hadn't looked at in your childhood and your past, you're integrating them, meaning they become part of your awareness. You're
Hmm.
not rejecting them anymore.
Hmm.
They're not scaring you. You're not running away from them anymore. They become part of who you are,
Hmm.
and they give you more energy. So now you're entering the realm of the collective unconscious, and there's where the animus is
So you have
present.
to do shadow work in order to really see the animus, but
Yeah.
you can get a taste of it just by think of the times you fell for someone.
Right.
You feel that like a love for someone in, those first glimpses of, even if it's Ludus
Yeah,
that kind of,
but in that case it's possessing you.
yeah. Oh yeah. But
It's
you can still have an experience of it. How do you
oh
can
yeah, you're experiencing it.
yeah.
Okay, but it's got you.
It's got you. And yeah, so the shadow work helps you direct
It
and
well,
you
it helps you just
work
like a
with it.
relationship. It helps you relate to that part of your
Yeah.
psyche
Hmm.
in a healthy way, just like a
Yeah.
good relationship. You're interacting with it and it's helping you grow instead of causing you this restlessness and this,
Out of control. Yeah.
yeah,
Can't
yeah,
sleep. Well, also too, just on a broader stage, with relationship with other elements of our psyche, it's the same thing with our ego. We have to have a relationship with our ego. It's not push it away, get rid of the ego. It's not try to change the ego. It's like, let's have a relationship, because then that if everyone gets along, and someone's in charge, you can start to move it.
why can't
Whatever
we all
you
get along?
Yeah, but whatever you resist will persist. So it's like the fighting and in any relationship, if you're arguing all the time, you're not really getting anywhere. But if you find that kind of, how do we work together? And that's kind of what we're doing with these elements of ourselves. It's like like Rob always says, when I'm stressed about something, he's like, you're fighting with yourself. And I'm like, I am fighting with myself. We're having these battles within ourselves, but they're played out in the characters in our life. We hand them the scripts. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make friends with this animus, but we really can't get to it until you start doing shadow work. Because what'll happen is you'll just project, like what we used to have people do, like look at your inner atom and do a visualization, but then they would project their ego's shadow onto this person, and it's like finding the man, and it kind of gets distorted versus the true connection with the animus.
Yeah, and ultimately it is your connection with the unconscious mind. and
Mm.
and the unconscious in the Jungian sense, it's much broader than just the, let's say, the things that happen to us.
Mm.
It's the repository of creativity,
Mm.
of religious symbolism, of your passion for life. That passion that you have for another, in, let's say, when you're infatuated with someone,
Mm.
you turn it into compassion,
Mm.
into a more spiritual life.
Okay, here's one. She posted it 3 times, so I guess she wants us to answer it. Maybe she hit the button couple times. How do we figure out who from our paternal figures in our life who plays out the most in our inner atom relationship wise? I met my maternal grandfather first, then at age 1 or 2, I met my father, and then I had a stepfather. So they all play a role.
Hmm. It depends on your relationship with them, with those
Mm-hmm.
individuals. What did you, kind of experience with each
Mm.
one? And often what we liked about our grandparents or our uncles and all that, those elements we absorb,
Mm-hmm.
right? We identify with them consciously. We say, I want to be like
Mm-hmm.
him, or
Mm-hmm.
I identify with that. I love that. And the things that we reject, that we say, oh, that hurt my feelings, or they ignored me. and
Mm-hmm.
and we do this instinctually. Remember, as children, we're very good at reading the emotional environment.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever we didn't like, we push into the shadow, but it didn't go anywhere. And so that will be part of your shadow work, to figure out, what did I identify with as the father figure,
Mm-hmm.
and what did I reject about that.
Mm-hmm. I've been in love with 3 men, but then only after I started awakening did I have real shadow relationship. And
Mm.
then the 5th one was more real, but still projecting onto him. So the next technically should be my 3rd after awakening, and feel that I will definitely recognize my projections. Well, it's one thing to recognize your projections. Remember, you have to work with the emotional elements there. You have to figure out
Yeah.
more, go deeper to what is it, just not have an intellectual understanding. You have to what is the
Yeah.
defenses that those projections have created. So
Yeah.
you're working with that emotion, the fears and the assumptions that you're making about being in a relationship.
Yeah, this is a common mistake. A lot of people think, well, I know my patterns, and I've done therapy, and I know all my uh, history and defenses and complexes. Insight is not enough. It won't get you there, because it's an intellectual exercise that you're
Mm.
doing there. You need to go directly to the emotional experience, which means facing your fears,
Mm-hmm.
right? In simple terms. And whatever the fear is,
Mm-hmm.
of intimacy, of love, of I'm not good enough, whatever it is, you're going to have to face it. Then you can move forward.
Mm-hmm. And all the love that you felt in those men were your love. And it's so those falling in love, it's like a taste of yourself.
Mm,
And a lot of times we fall in love with people that break our heart because we break our own hearts. We break our hearts every day. We beat ourselves up. We don't accept parts of ourselves. That's what we're working on, is finding that wholeness. So yes, awakening is really important. We want to awaken, but we have to, face the dark parts of our shadow, the parts that hide all the gold that we have inside.
yeah, I always say shadow work is probably the hardest thing to do, and the hardest
Mm,
thing we'll do as human beings, but it's the only worthwhile thing,
mm,
because nothing compares. Not the degrees, not the accomplishments, not the relationships, whatever we create externally does not compare with what the shadow work gives you.
mm,
That sense of yourself, that groundedness,
mm.
that's invaluable.
Sorry, I didn't mean to post my question 3 times. I was just trying to edit it. That's cute. Okay, that's fine. We were just teasing you. Sometimes happens. People will post and hit the button twice, and then it keeps posting. But
There's no such things as accidents.
so maybe you really did want to know the answer. But that's no problem. I rejected most of my stepfather's persona, and has been my shadow work for sure. Yeah. Um, uh, Actually, I feel like my mother has a bigger impact on my romantic relationships than the male figures. Can this be possible? Yeah, when we talk about animus, remember it's a partnership with our conscious mind. So our conscious feminine, we work with our new system. We have the 4 personas that women take on, and they're based on the 4 feminine archetypes: the mother, the lover, the professional, and the mystic. And whatever we choose, whatever our mother role that we reject, we usually um, choose the opposite.
Mm.
We reject a mother's, stay at home mom. We become the professional, or we reject the mother never being there for us. So we need to be the mother, and we choose that role. And so those play into, think about it. Your parents are the dynamic, are reflecting how you innerly conceive yourself. So the conscious self, the feminine, and the masculine are kind of like, if you look at your parents' relationship, that's kind of the relationship with the inner Adam. So yeah, it's a dynamic between your parents. Not only they're a lot of people think, oh, this is part of their personality, but what is the dynamic between the parents? That's going to reflect your inner dynamic of where the masculine and feminine. So yes, that's very wise. I mean, I used to think that too. Like, oh, it's my dad's issues, but really it was me rejecting the mother that caused the whole process of me being single till I was in my 40s and running away from all the nice guys just because I didn't want to be trapped, even though consciously I thought I wanted to be a wife and I wanted children and I wanted that role. But you don't even realize what you're rejecting. It's interesting. We think we know our patterns, but until you do the shadow work, you really don't. You really think you think you got it all figured out. And then you're like, oh, it was like, I remember the moment I said, oh my God, I am doing this to myself. And then I was sad for a moment. And then I thought, well, now I have the key. Like, it was like almost like that really shifted in my mind that now I can choose this. And until you're aware of what's that pattern is on a deep level, you're not going to be able to choose. And that's what the shadow work is all about. And we recommend it to everyone. And you have to do it with a coach. This isn't something you can do on your own and figure out and write down, what's the opposite. You need someone to guide you, because the ego will try to go around it. It'll justify it. It'll say, yeah, you did enough shadow work. It's okay. But having a coach really helps you stay accountable, and you're invested because you're investing in the coach. And then you're going to do the work. You're going to say, I'm going to get through this. And it is really powerful. Okay. I think those are all the questions.
Great questions.
So again, we go deep into this work. If you're interested, even if you don't want to be a coach, talk to me about the life coach training that starts in June. We're going to go through the shadow work. We're going to go through the inner Adam. We're going to talk about dreams. It's going to be an amazing transformation, and you're really going to know yourself in deeper ways than you ever thought possible, with all the coaching and all the teachings. And it's just an amazing journey. I hope that if this calls to you, I hope you join us, because it's going to change your life. You never look at yourself the same way again. That's for sure.
That's right.
And you'll be well supported. And we have a great group already, so I'm really excited. We getting full pretty fast. So if you're interested, please apply, speak to me directly, and ask about it. And if you just want shadow work, our mentors are here in the group. They're really ready to take you on. We have some really great pricing for the mentor coaching. Get some really great direct work from people who've trained in the process. There's nothing out there like this. So our coaches are special. We love them. Hello, mentors. And they're really the best. And you're in good hands.
Thanks for the great questions. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yes.
Stay safe, stay well, stay hydrated. And we'll see you on our next soul session.
Next Saturday. It's our little Souls Church on Saturdays. And we are so glad you're here and love all the questions and the engagement. And welcome to the group for the new members. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Take care.